At 20 years old, she was given to a widowed rancher with 4 children. And the outcome is incredible. Emily Johnson never imagined her life could end up like this, with her father squeezing her hand tightly as they walked toward the pickup truck that would take her away from everything she knew. She could barely breathe, and the tears she tried to hold back burned in her eyes. That's when she heard her father's voice, low and filled with shame. "Emily, I had no other choice. You need to understand." "Understand what, Dad? That you're selling me off like I'm cattle?" Her voice came out trembling but full of hurt. Robert Johnson closed his eyes for a moment, as if his daughter's words were knives. He knew she was right, but the debt he'd incurred years ago with Henry Thompson had grown so large he saw no other way out. The rancher had proposed an agreement that seemed like the only alternative to prevent them from losing everything. "You'll live on a good ranch. You'll have food every day. You'll have a roof over your head. It's not the end of the world." Emily looked at her father with a mixture of disbelief and pain. "You know this is wrong. Mum wouldn't agree with this." The mention of his late wife made Robert shudder. Mary Johnson had passed away 2 years ago, taking with her the only light that kept that family together. Since then, the small market he ran in the town of Bakersfield, in inland California, had started to sink. Debts piled up, suppliers cut off credit, and when Henry Thompson appeared offering help, Robert accepted without thinking about the consequences. Now, 3 years later, the bill had come due. Emily saw the ranch appear on the horizon as her father's pickup truck traveled down the dirt road. The place was huge, with white fences stretching for miles, lush green pastures where cattle grazed peacefully, and in the background, a large brick house that seemed to have seen better days. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over everything, creating a beauty that cruelly contrasted with the tightness in her chest. When they got out of the pickup truck, Emily noticed 4 pairs of eyes fixed on her. They were the children, all lined up on the porch of the house as if they were expecting something bad. The oldest, a blonde girl with her hair in a ponytail, had her arms crossed and a stern expression on her face. Beside her, 3 boys of different ages watched silently, with curiosity and suspicion mixed together. Henry Thompson appeared in the main doorway. He was a tall man, with broad shoulders and a well-groomed grey beard. He wore a blue plaid shirt and jeans worn from work. His eyes, which must have been kind once, now carried a hardness that Emily felt immediately. "Robert," said Henry, coming down the porch steps with firm steps. "Henry," replied Emily's father, extending his hand in a greeting that was too formal for the situation. Emily stood there, feeling invisible while the 2 men talked as if they were closing a cattle deal. She gripped the strap of the small suitcase she carried, the only thing her father had allowed her to bring. Inside were a few clothes, a photo of her mother, and the necklace she'd received on her 15th birthday. "She'll work hard," said Robert, his voice sounding mechanical. "Emily has always been a good girl, obedient." "I hope so," replied Henry, finally looking at her. His gaze was cold, evaluative, as if he were checking whether what he'd bought was worth the price paid. Emily felt anger rise in her throat, but she swallowed it dry. There was no use screaming, no use crying. This was already decided. "You can go, Robert, it's all settled," said Henry, turning toward the house. Emily looked at her father, hoping perhaps for a hug, a word of comfort, something that showed he still cared. But Robert just waved from afar, got into the pickup truck and drove off, kicking up dust on the road. She stood there, watching the car disappear over the horizon, taking with it the last connection to her former life. "Come in," ordered Henry without looking back. Emily followed the man into the house. The interior was spacious, but there was an air of neglect about everything. The furniture was dusty, the curtains faded, and the smell of mold mixed with old food hung in the air. It was as if no one had truly cared for that place in years. Henry led her down a narrow hallway to a small room at the back of the house. The room had only a single bed with old sheets, a scratched dresser, and a window facing the corral. The light that came in was dim, filtered by the dirt on the glass. "You'll sleep here. We wake up at 5 in the morning. Breakfast ready at 5:30. Work starts at 6, he said, without mincing words. "And what is my work?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Take care of the house, cook, do laundry, the basics, and don't meddle with the children. They don't need you." The coldness in his voice cut deep. Emily just nodded, and Henry left, slamming the door. She was alone in that tiny room, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on her shoulders. She sat on the bed, which creaked under her weight, and finally let the tears fall. She cried silently, hugging the suitcase as if it were the only solid thing in a world that had crumbled. She thought of her mother, how she always said life had ways of teaching hard lessons, but in the end, everything worked out. Emily wanted to believe that, but at that moment everything seemed lost. Night fell quickly in the countryside. Emily heard the sounds of the house, heavy footsteps, slamming doors, muffled voices. She didn't leave the room, afraid of encountering the children's hostility or Henry's indifference. She stayed there, lying on the hard bed, staring at the cracked ceiling and trying to imagine what her life would be like from then on. That's when she heard a scream. It was a sharp, desperate scream coming from somewhere in the house. Emily jumped up, her heart racing. She opened the bedroom door slowly and peeked down the hallway. The lights were off, but she could see a glow coming from one of the rooms upstairs. Another scream. This time, it was more distressing, followed by convulsive crying. Emily carefully climbed the stairs, each step creaking under her feet. She reached the upper hallway and saw a door ajar, from where the light and sounds of despair were coming. She approached and peeked in. Inside the room, a little boy who couldn't have been more than 6 years old was sitting on the bed, his whole body tense, his wide eyes fixed on something only he could see. Henry was beside him, trying to hold him, but the boy thrashed as if fighting an invisible monster. "Calm down, Johnny, calm down," said Henry, his voice for the first time filled with something other than coldness. There was desperation there, helplessness. But the boy didn't stop. He screamed nonsense words, called out for someone, cried as if the world were ending. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Emily didn't think twice. She entered the room, ignoring Henry's surprised look. She slowly approached the bed and sat on the edge, keeping a safe distance from the boy. "Johnny," she said softly, her voice gentle like the night breeze. The boy stopped screaming for a moment, his confused eyes turning to her. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice choked. "My name is Emily, and I know something that can help you." Henry was about to protest, but Emily raised her hand, asking for silence. She began to sing. It was an old song that her grandmother used to sing to her when she was little and afraid of the dark. The melody was simple. The words spoke of stars and moonlight, of peace and safety. Johnny stood still, his eyes fixed on Emily. Tears still streamed down his little face, but the despair began to fade. She kept singing, her voice filling the room with a sweetness that seemed to soothe even the shadows on the walls. Gradually, the boy lay down again, his eyes still on Emily. She continued singing, now gently running her hand through his hair, just as her mother used to do with her. Johnny let out a deep sigh, his body relaxing, and within minutes he was asleep. Emily finished the song and sat there a while longer just to be sure. When she got up, she found Henry standing in the doorway, watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "How did you do that?" he asked, his voice low. "My grandmother taught me. She said music soothes even the most frightened heart." Henry was silent for a long moment, his eyes still on his son sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. "He has these nightmares every night. Nothing works. I've tried everything." Emily said nothing. She just nodded and left the room, returning to her corner at the back of the house. But as she went down the stairs, she felt Henry's gaze on her back, a look different from what she had seen before. The next day, Emily woke before 5. Her body ached from sleeping on that uncomfortable bed, but she got up, washed her face in an old basin she found in the room, and went to the kitchen. The house was quiet, wrapped in the darkness that comes before dawn. She turned on the light and nearly jumped. There, sitting at the table, was the older girl she had seen the day before. The teenager stared at her with hard eyes, her arms crossed over her chest. "Good morning," said Emily, trying to sound friendly. The girl didn't answer. She just kept staring with that look of contempt. Emily swallowed hard and went to the stove. She needed to make coffee and had no idea where things were. She opened the cabinets, looking for coffee, bread, eggs, anything she could use. "What are you looking for?" asked the girl, her voice full of disdain. "Coffee, I need to make breakfast." "And you think you can just come in here and take over my mother's kitchen?" The silence that followed was heavy. Emily turned slowly to face the girl. "I'm not here because I want to be, and I didn't come to take anyone's place. My mother was 1,000 times better than you, and you will never, ever be able to replace her." Before Emily could respond, the girl stood up, knocked the chair to the floor with a crash and stormed out of the kitchen. Emily stood there, her heart heavy, feeling the weight of that hostility. She eventually found the coffee and prepared everything as best she could. When Henry came down, there was bread, fresh coffee, scrambled eggs, and fruit on the table. He looked at it all in surprise, but said nothing. He just sat down and began to eat in silence. The children came down one by one. Johnny, the youngest she had helped the night before, smiled shyly when he saw her. The older girl, whom Emily later learned was named Beth, sat as far away from her as possible and ate in silence, shooting looks of pure hatred. The two middle boys, Greg and Ryan, 12 and 9 years old respectively, seemed curious but cautious. "Everyone has chores today," announced Henry, still chewing. "Beth, you're helping with the cattle. Greg and Ryan, you need to fix the fence in the south pasture. Johnny stays here with Emily." "I don't want to stay with her," said Johnny, but his voice lacked conviction. "You're staying," said Henry, ending any discussion. The day passed in a grueling routine. Emily cleaned the house from top to bottom, amazed at the amount of dirt that had accumulated. Every corner revealed years of neglect, as if the family had simply given up on keeping things in order. Johnny stayed nearby, watching her with curiosity, but without speaking much. "Are you going to sing again tonight?" he asked in the middle of the afternoon, while she was sweeping the living room floor. Emily stopped and looked at the boy. "If you want." Johnny nodded, a shy smile appearing on his face. It was the first sign of affection Emily had received in that house, and she felt something warm in her chest. When night came, Emily was exhausted. Every muscle in her body ached, and she could barely stand. But before going to sleep, she went up to Johnny's room. The boy was already lying down, his eyes open in the dark. "I came to sing," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Johnny smiled, and Emily began the song. Just like the night before, the boy fell asleep peacefully, without screams, without nightmares. When Emily left the room, she found Beth in the hallway. The girl stared at her with eyes shining with anger. "Do you think you're going to buy us with your stupid songs?" Emily took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I'm just trying to help." "No one asked for your help. No one wants you here." And before Emily could respond, Beth went into her room and slammed the door hard. Emily went back to her room in the back, closed the door and collapsed on the bed. The tears came again, but this time she let them flow freely. She was tired of holding back, tired of being strong. In the days that followed, the routine repeated itself. Emily woke up early, made coffee, cleaned the house, cooked, washed clothes. It was endless work, and Henry never said thank you, never acknowledged her effort. He just watched, silently, with those hard eyes that revealed nothing. Beth remained hostile. She did everything to make Emily's life difficult. She threw dirty clothes on the floor on purpose, spilled food, hid things Emily needed, and whenever their eyes met, there was that expression of pure hatred. It was on a Saturday afternoon, when Henry and the boys were in the pasture and Johnny was asleep, that Beth did something that crossed all limits. Emily was in the yard hanging clothes when she heard the sound of something being locked. She ran to the back door and found that Beth had locked her in the barn. The building was old, dark, and full of spider webs. "Beth!" Emily shouted, banging on the door. "Open this door!" On the other side, she heard laughter. "Stay there and think about what you came to do in our house." Emily tried to force the door, but it was useless. The lock was heavy and well secured. She looked around, searching for another way out, but the barn had only one small window too high to reach. The hours passed. Emily tried not to panic, but the heat inside the barn was suffocating, and the darkness seemed to close in on her. She sat on the dirt floor, hugging her knees, and tried to calm down. She thought of her mother, how she always said to never give up, no matter how hard things got. She thought of her father, how he had abandoned her there. She thought of her old life, the freedom she had, her friends, the dreams that now seemed impossible. When it finally grew dark, Emily heard footsteps outside. The door opened and Henry appeared, a flashlight in his hand and a confused expression on his face. "What are you doing here?" Emily stood up slowly, her legs numb. "Beth locked me in here. It's been hours." Henry looked at her, then at the house, and his jaw tightened. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "How? I was locked in. When I get back, you tell me these things." Emily felt anger rising. "And what are you going to do? Scold your daughter for my sake? That will only make things worse." Henry fell silent, clearly having no answer for that. "Go take a bath and prepare dinner," he said finally, turning away. Emily walked past him and entered the house. She took a quick shower, changed her clothes, and went to the kitchen. While cooking, she thought about everything that was happening. She knew she needed to earn those children's trust, but had no idea how to do it when the oldest one hated her so much. During dinner, Beth didn't even look at her. The boys ate in silence, and Johnny yawned, already tired from the day. When they finished, Emily cleared the plates and started washing them. That's when she heard Greg's voice behind her. "Do you need help?" Emily turned around, surprised. The 12-year-old boy stood there, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. "If you'd like." Greg grabbed a towel and began drying the dishes. They worked in silence for a while, until the boy spoke. "Sorry about Beth. She's been like that with everyone since my mum left." Emily stopped washing and looked at him. "Left?" Greg seemed to realize he'd said too much. He swallowed hard and nodded. "Everyone says she passed away, but that's not what happened. She left one night and never came back." Emily's heart tightened. So the story Henry told was a lie. His wife hadn't died. She had abandoned them. "How long ago?" 3 years. I was 9. Beth saw her leaving. She was the only one who did." Emily didn't know what to say. That explained so much. Beth's hostility, Henry's harshness, the neglected state of the house. "And your father? How did he handle it?" Greg shrugged. "He pretends nothing happened, tells everyone she passed away and we have to pretend along with him. But it's a lie." Before Emily could respond, Beth appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Greg, what are you doing?" The boy froze. "Just helping with the dishes." "Don't help her. She's not part of our family." Greg hung his head and quickly left the kitchen. Beth shot a warning look at Emily and followed her brother. Emily finished washing the dishes alone, her mind racing with what she had just discovered. Henry's wife hadn't passed away, she had abandoned them, and he lied about it to everyone, forcing his children to keep up the charade. That night, when Emily went to sing for Johnny, she couldn't get it out of her head. There were so many secrets in that house, so many unhealed wounds, and she was right in the middle of it all, not knowing how to navigate such turbulent waters. The weeks passed, and Emily learned the ranch's routine. She woke before sunrise, made coffee, took care of the house, cooked 3 meals a day, washed mountains of laundry. It was hard, relentless work, but she didn't complain. Complaining would only make things worse. Greg began to get closer. He came to help her in the kitchen, told her about school, about how he struggled with math. Emily, who had always been good with numbers, started helping him with his homework. The evenings became precious moments where she and Greg sat at the kitchen table after everyone was asleep, working on math problems and talking about simple things. Johnny also grew attached to her. The boy couldn't fall asleep anymore without Emily singing to him, and gradually the nightmares lessened, until some nights he slept through the night without waking up screaming. Ryan, the middle one, was more reserved. He watched Emily from a distance, curious but cautious. Sometimes she caught him looking while she cooked or cleaned, but when their eyes met, he quickly looked away. Beth, on the other hand, remained relentless in her hostility. She did everything she could to make Emily's life unbearable. She hid her things, spread rumors among the children, and whenever Henry wasn't around, she made cruel comments. It was on a rainy morning that everything changed dramatically. Emily woke to the sound of thunder. The storm had started overnight and was now at its peak. The wind rattled the windows and the rain fell in thick sheets, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. She got up, made coffee as usual, and went down to the kitchen. But when she turned on the light, she noticed something was wrong. Water was dripping from the ceiling, forming puddles on the floor. Emily ran to wake Henry. "The roof is leaking." Henry jumped up and went to check. When he returned, his face was grim. "Part of the roof gave way. I need to fix it before it gets worse." "I'll help," Emily said without thinking. "You?" "I'm not useless. I can hold things, pass tools, whatever you need." Henry looked at her for a long moment, as if assessing whether she could really help. Finally, he nodded. "Put on something you don't mind getting wet." Emily rushed to the bedroom, changed her clothes, and came back. Henry was already climbing a ladder to the roof, a toolbox in one hand and tarps in the other. Emily climbed up behind him, her heart pounding. Up there, the wind was much stronger. The rain beat down hard, and Emily could barely keep her eyes open. Henry was already working, trying to cover the hole in the roof with a tarp and nail it to the shingles. "Hold this end," he shouted over the noise of the rain. Emily grabbed the edge of the tarp and held it tight, while Henry nailed down the other end. The wind tried to tear it from her hands, but she didn't let go. Her fingers grew numb from gripping the wet tarp, but she kept holding on. They worked for over an hour in that storm. Henry nailed, Emily held, passed tools, adjusted positions. It was teamwork, and for the first time since she'd arrived at that ranch, Emily felt she was truly contributing. When they finally finished, they were both soaked to the bone. Henry looked at their work and nodded with satisfaction. "Good job," he said, and Emily realized it was the first time he'd acknowledged something she'd done. They came down from the roof together. Down below, the children were all in the living room, looking out the window with worry. When they saw Emily and Henry coming down, Johnny ran and hugged her leg. "I thought you were going to fall." Emily smiled and ruffled the boy's wet hair. "I'm fine. Don't worry." Even Greg and Ryan seemed impressed. Beth, on the other hand, just looked disdainful and went up to her room. Emily went to change her clothes, and when she returned to the kitchen, she found Henry already sitting at the table, a cup of coffee in his hands. He watched her as she prepared the delayed breakfast. "Where did you learn to work like that?" "From my mother. She always said a woman had to know how to do everything because we never know what life will bring." Henry took another sip of coffee, thoughtful. She was right. It was the beginning of a subtle change. Henry didn't become kinder or more affectionate, but he started to acknowledge Emily's work. Sometimes at the end of the day, he'd say a simple thank you, and Emily sensed it was more than he showed most people. But if things were improving with Henry and the children, a new storm was about to arrive. It was on a Thursday afternoon that a car stopped in front of the ranch. Emily was in the yard hanging laundry when she heard the engine noise. She turned and saw a man get out of the vehicle. He was tall, dark-skinned, with black hair and a confident smile. He wore expensive clothes and had an air of someone used to getting what he wanted. Henry came out of the house and greeted the man, but Emily noticed tension in the air. "Theodore," said Henry, his voice controlled. "Henry, my brother. Long time no see." "Brother." Emily felt a chill. That was Henry's brother, and from the farmer's reaction, the visit was not welcome. The two men entered the house, and Emily continued with her work, but kept her ears alert. Shortly after, she heard raised voices coming from the living room. She approached slowly, pretending to clean a nearby window. "You're crazy, Theodore. These lands are mine." "That's not what the documents say, brother. Dad left half to me." "He left the whole ranch to me. You got the inheritance money. And I spent it. Now I want what's rightfully mine." Emily felt a knot in her stomach. That sounded like the start of a big problem. "I won't give you anything, Theodore. This ranch is mine and my children's. Then we'll settle it in court." There was a heavy silence, and then Emily heard footsteps approaching. She quickly went back to cleaning the window, pretending she hadn't heard anything. Theodore left the house, got in the car, and drove off, leaving a trail of dust behind. Henry stood in the doorway, his shoulders tense, his hands clenched into fists. Emily approached slowly. "Is everything okay?" He looked at her as if he had forgotten she was there. "It's my problem, don't get involved," and he turned around, entering the house and slamming the door. Emily stood there in the yard, her heart heavy. She knew that was just the beginning of something much bigger, and she was right. In the following days, Theodore came back several times, always bringing papers, always arguing with Henry. Emily watched them from a distance, worried. Henry was getting more and more tense, more withdrawn. He barely ate, barely slept, and spent hours locked in the office looking at documents. It was on one of those nights that Emily decided to act. She knocked on Henry's office door. "What do you want?" he asked, annoyed. "Can I come in?" Henry sighed and motioned for her to enter. Emily closed the door behind her and approached the desk full of papers. "I heard you and your brother arguing, and I know you're worried about the ranch." "So what? It's none of your business." "I know. But before coming here, I helped my dad at the market. I learned to read contracts, to understand paperwork. If you want, I can take a look at these documents." Henry looked at her with suspicion. "Why would you do that?" Emily took a deep breath. "Because this ranch is the children's home, and even if they don't like me, especially Beth, I don't want to see them lose everything." Henry was silent for a long time, his eyes fixed on her as if trying to read her soul. Finally, he pushed the documents toward her. "Go ahead and look." Emily sat down and started reading. They were old contracts, wills, deeds. She spent hours there, reading line by line, trying to understand everything. And the more she read, the more she realized there was something strange. "Henry," she said finally, "these documents your brother brought, they have inconsistent dates." "What do you mean?" "Look here. This paper says it was filed in 2018, but the signature is dated 2020, and here the notary stamp doesn't match the period it should." Henry came closer, took the papers and examined them. His eyes widened. "Are you saying he forged these?" "I'm not sure, but there are many things that don't make sense. If I were you, I'd take this to a lawyer to check." Henry looked at Emily with an expression she had never seen before. There was gratitude there and maybe even a little respect. "Thank you." Emily nodded and left the office, but as she returned to her room, she felt she had crossed an invisible line. Henry now saw her differently, no longer as an obligation, but perhaps as someone useful. In the following days, Henry took the documents to a lawyer in town. The answer confirmed Emily's suspicions. The papers were forged. Theodore had altered dates and signatures, trying to steal half of his brother's land. When Henry returned from town with the confirmation, he gathered the children in the living room and told them everything. Beth listened in silence, arms crossed, but Emily saw something different in her eyes when Henry mentioned that Emily had uncovered the forgery. "So, Emily saved the ranch?" asked Johnny, his eyes wide. "She helped," said Henry, reluctant to give more credit than that. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. But it was enough. Greg smiled at Emily, and even Ryan nodded gratefully. Beth, however, just stood up and left the room without a word. Henry decided to confront Theodore, but in a way that left no room for doubt. He called his brother to come to the ranch, and when Theodore arrived, a lawyer was present. Emily watched everything from the kitchen window. She saw Henry show the fake documents to Theodore, saw the man's face change color, saw the heated argument. In the end, Theodore got in his car and left, defeated for now, but Emily knew it wasn't over. "He'll be back," Henry said that night during dinner. "Men like Theodore don't give up easily." "What are you going to do?" asked Greg. "I'll keep the original documents in a safe place, and I'll keep an eye out." Emily felt a weight in her stomach. She knew the situation was far from resolved, and that Theodore was probably already planning his next move, and she was right. 2 weeks later, problems started at the ranch. First, the cattle began to get sick. Henry called the vet who diagnosed poisoning from toxic plants, but those plants didn't exist in that pasture. Someone had put them there on purpose. Then, the water pump broke. Henry went to check and found that someone had sabotaged the equipment, breaking essential parts. And then came the rumors in town. People started saying that Henry was in debt, that the ranch was going bankrupt, that he had been involved with a young woman inappropriately. Suppliers began cutting off credit, and even some workers quit. Emily knew all of that was Theodore's doing. He was attacking in every possible way, trying to force Henry to sell the land or hand it over. It was on a Sunday morning that Emily had an idea. She looked for Henry, who was in the corral trying to separate the sick cattle. "I know the women in town. My mother was very well liked there, and I was raised among them. If I talk to them, I can undo these rumors." "And how are you going to do that?" "By telling the truth, sharing what's really happening here." Henry looked at her for a long moment. "And what is happening here, Emily?" She swallowed hard. "A family trying to survive, and a man trying to destroy everything out of greed." Henry nodded slowly. "Do what you think is best." Emily went to town the next day. She visited the market, the church, the homes of the women who knew her mother, and she spoke. She told them about Theodore, the sabotage, the fake documents. She told them how Henry was trying to keep the ranch running, how the children needed that place. The women listened, and they believed, because Emily was Mary Johnson's daughter, a respected woman, and because her story made sense. Within a few days, the rumors began to change direction. Now Henry wasn't the villain, Theodore was. People started talking about the greedy brother who wanted to steal the children's inheritance. Suppliers began offering credit again, and even some workers who had left asked to come back. When Emily returned to the ranch and told Henry what she had done, he looked at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. There was surprise there, and maybe even something more. "You didn't have to do that." "I know, but I wanted to." Henry nodded, and Emily saw something soften in his eyes. "Thank you." It was the first time he had said that word with genuine sincerity. Things got better for a while. The cattle recovered, the pump was fixed, and the ranch was back to running normally. Emily continued with her hard work, but now there was a silent respect between her and Henry. He was still tough and reserved, but he was no longer hostile. The children had changed too. Greg now openly sought Emily's company, asking for help with his homework and talking about his dreams. Ryan began to approach as well, shy but curious. Johnny was the most affectionate, always looking for hugs and songs. Beth, however, remained a wall of ice. She still gave cold stares, still made nasty comments when she could. But Emily sensed that something was different now. The hostility wasn't as intense anymore. It was almost as if Beth was holding something back, fighting something inside herself. It was on a stormy night, weeks later, that everything changed between them. Emily was in the kitchen finishing the dishes when she heard a sound from the living room. She dried her hands and went to check. There was Beth sitting on the couch, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Emily stood in the doorway, unsure what to do. Approaching might make things worse, but leaving the girl there alone felt wrong. She took a step forward. "Beth?" The girl jerked her head up, her face red and wet with tears. "Get out of here." "You're crying." "So what? It's none of your business." Emily moved closer slowly, as if dealing with a wounded animal. "I know you hate me. I know you don't want me here, but I also know you're carrying something very heavy all by yourself. You don't know anything about me. Then tell me." Beth looked at Emily with eyes full of pain and anger. "Why? Why do you care?" "Because I know what it's like to carry a burden alone. I know what it's like to feel like no one understands what you're going through." The words seemed to hit something in Beth. She sobbed louder and hid her face again. "I saw her leave," the girl said, her voice muffled. "I saw my mother leaving in the middle of the night. She had a suitcase and there was a man waiting for her on the road." Emily sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "And you never told anyone?" "I told my dad, but he didn't believe me. He said I was dreaming, that my mother had passed away, but I know what I saw, and everyone keeps repeating that lie, saying she died when she really abandoned us. She chose to leave and leave us here." The words poured out as if Beth had held them inside for too long. Emily felt her heart ache for the girl. "And you blame your dad for it?" Beth nodded, tears streaming. He was never affectionate. He never hugged her, never said nice things. I think she got tired. But I blame myself too. Because if I had been a better daughter, more obedient, less stubborn, maybe she would have stayed. Emily couldn't hold back. She hugged Beth, pulling the girl close. Beth resisted for a moment, but then broke down, crying heavily on Emily's shoulder. "It wasn't your fault," Emily said softly. "Nothing that happened was your fault. You were just a child. But I should have been better. I should have done something." "There's nothing you could have done. Adult choices aren't the responsibility of children." They stayed there, holding each other, while the storm outside mirrored the storm inside Beth. The girl cried until she had no tears left, and Emily just held her, offering the comfort Beth had denied herself for 3 long years. When they finally parted, Beth wiped her face with her hands. "I treated you so badly." "You were angry, I understand. But it wasn't fair. You didn't have a choice to come here, just like we didn't have a choice in you coming." Emily smiled sadly. "None of us chose this situation, but we're all here now trying to do the best we can." Beth nodded slowly. "I still miss her. Even knowing she abandoned us, I still wish she'd come back. It's normal to miss her. She's your mother. But you don't have to carry that pain alone. You have your siblings, your father, and you have me if you want." Beth looked at Emily with red but clearer eyes. "You're not leaving. I don't know what the future holds, but while I'm here, you can count on me." For the first time since Emily had arrived at that ranch, Beth smiled. It was a small, hesitant smile, but it was real. "Thank you," the girl said softly. That night marked a turning point. Beth didn't become immediately friendly, but the hostility had disappeared. She started helping Emily in the kitchen, talking about simple things, including her in conversations with her siblings. It was slow progress, but it was progress. Henry noticed the change. One evening he pulled Emily aside while she was putting away the dishes. "What did you say to Beth?" "I just listened to her. Sometimes that's all a person needs." Henry fell silent, his eyes fixed on her. "She never told me what she was feeling, never opened up. Maybe she needed to talk to someone from the outside, someone who wasn't so involved in the situation." Henry nodded slowly, and Emily saw something shift in his eyes. It was vulnerability, a crack in the armor he kept around himself. "My wife left me because I was a difficult man. I know that. I didn't know how to show affection, didn't know how to say the right things. And when she left, I got so angry that I just erased her from my life. I told everyone she had passed away because it was easier than admitting she abandoned me." Emily listened silently, letting him talk. "But by doing that, I also erased her from the children's lives. And they were left unable to talk about it, unable to process what happened. I forced them to live a lie." "You were in pain," said Emily gently. "People do strange things when they're in pain. That doesn't justify it. I was selfish. And look at the result. My oldest daughter hates me. My children grew up not knowing how to express emotions, and this ranch became a cold, dead place. It's not too late to change." Henry looked at her, and Emily saw tears in his eyes for the first time. "I don't know how. Start small. Talk to Beth. Let her know you're ready to listen, that you won't deny what happened anymore." Henry nodded, wiping his eyes quickly as if embarrassed to show emotion. "And what about you, Emily? How are you handling all this?" The question took her by surprise. No one had asked how she was since she'd arrived there. "I'm surviving. Some days are harder than others, but the children give me a reason to keep going." "You're good with them, better than I ever was." "You're their father. They love you, even if they don't know how to show it." Henry smiled sadly. "Thank you for everything you've done. I know I don't say it often, but it's true." That conversation changed something between Emily and Henry. He started opening up more, talking during meals, asking her opinion about ranch matters. It was as if he'd finally realized that Emily wasn't just an obligation or a worker, but a person with her own thoughts and feelings. The weeks turned into months. Spring arrived, bringing flowers and colors to the ranch. Emily planted a garden in the backyard, and the children helped. They spent entire afternoons there, digging, planting, watering, laughing together. Beth began teaching Emily how to ride a horse. The two would go out for walks around the property, talking about everything and nothing. Beth shared her dreams of studying veterinary medicine, about how she wanted to help animals. Emily listened and encouraged, making the girl believe her dreams were possible. Greg improved greatly in school with Emily's help. He passed the year with good grades and was beaming with pride. Ryan started drawing and discovered he had a natural talent. Emily hung his drawings around the house, turning the white walls into galleries of children's art. Johnny no longer had nightmares. He slept through the night, calm and happy, and every night before bed he would ask Emily to sing, not because he needed it to fall asleep, but because he enjoyed listening. The ranch was changing. It was no longer that cold, abandoned place. There was life there now, laughter, conversations, affection. The flowers Emily had planted began to bloom, and with them it seemed the family was blooming too. But the peace wouldn't last forever. It was on a hot December afternoon that Theodore returned, but this time he didn't come alone. There were men with him, workers Emily didn't recognize. Henry went out to meet them, and Emily saw the tension in his shoulders. "What do you want, Theodore?" "I came to get what's mine. Since you don't want to resolve this civilly, I'll have to take it back." "You won't take anything. This land is mine." Theodore smiled, but it was a cruel smile. "We'll see about that. My lawyers have already filed a lawsuit, and while that gets resolved, I'll make sure you can't get this ranch to work." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." The men began to spread out across the property. Emily saw them damaging fences, scaring the cattle, breaking equipment. It was blatant sabotage, and there was nothing Henry could do alone. That's when Emily had an idea. She ran into the house, grabbed the phone, and started making calls. She called the townswomen she had spoken to before. She called the suppliers. She called everyone who could help. "I need help at Thompson Ranch. Now." In less than an hour, vehicles started arriving. Men and women from town, bringing tools, bringing the will to help. They came because they trusted Emily, because they believed Henry was being wronged. Theodore turned pale seeing the number of people arriving. His men hesitated, realizing they were outnumbered. "This isn't over," said Theodore, pointing at Henry. "Yes, it is," replied a voice behind him. It was Beth. The 16-year-old girl stood there, a box of documents in her hands. "I found the original papers Dad signed when Grandpa passed away. They were hidden in the barn, and they prove that you received your share of the inheritance in cash and signed a document renouncing any rights to the land." Theodore snatched the papers from Beth's hands and read them quickly. His expression changed from anger to panic. "Where did you find these?" "In the place where you threw them after signing. You thought no one would look in the old barn, but I did, because unlike you, I care about this ranch and this family." Emily felt pride swell in her chest. Beth stood there, firm and strong, defending what was rightfully hers. Theodore looked around, seeing all those people looking at him with disapproval. He knew he was defeated. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice was weak. "Yes, it is," replied Henry. "And if you come near this ranch again, I'll go to the police with evidence of all the sabotage you've done. Now get off my property." Theodore and his men left. Defeated. When his car disappeared over the horizon, everyone began to celebrate. There were hugs, laughter, relief. Henry embraced Beth, and for the first time Emily saw them show affection for each other. It was a beautiful moment, and she felt tears in her eyes. "You were very brave," Henry told his daughter. "I learned from Emily," Beth replied, looking at her with gratitude. The townspeople stayed to help fix what Theodore had broken. They worked together the rest of the day, and when the sun set, the ranch was back to normal. Emily prepared food for everyone, and they ate together in the backyard under the stars. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. It was a spontaneous party, full of music, conversation, and laughter. Emily looked around and saw happy faces, saw community, saw what happens when people come together for a just cause. When everyone had left and the children were asleep, Emily was in the kitchen cleaning when Henry came in. You organized all this, didn't you? Emily smiled shyly. I just asked for help. They came because they wanted to. They came because you inspired them. You showed that it's worth fighting for what's right. Emily didn't know what to say. Henry stepped closer, getting very near to her. Emily, I need to tell you something, and it's not easy for me. Her heart raced. What is it? When you first came here, I saw you as an obligation, as part of a debt I had to pay. But you've become so much more than that. You brought life to this house. You healed my children in ways I never could, and you made me want to be a better person. Emily felt tears burning in her eyes. Henry, let me finish. I know our situation isn't conventional. I know you didn't choose to be here, but I wanted to know if maybe in time you could choose to stay. Not out of obligation, but because you want to. Emily looked at this man who just months ago was merely a cold, distant stranger. But now, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, seeing the man he was striving to be, she felt something shift in her chest. I don't know, Henry. This is all so complicated. I know, and I'm not asking for an answer right now. Just think about it. He turned to leave, but Emily held his arm. Henry, I've already thought, and the truth is, I don't know if I want to stay because I feel I should, or because I truly want to. I need time to understand my own feelings. Henry nodded, understanding. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. The following months were transformative for everyone. Henry began to open up emotionally with the children. He hugged more, talked more, was more present. Beth flourished under this attention, returning to the teenager she should have been if she hadn't carried so much weight on her shoulders. Greg started dreaming of becoming a math teacher, inspired by Emily. Ryan discovered he loved cooking and began helping Emily in the kitchen, creating his own recipes. Johnny was simply a happy child running around the ranch with the dog Henry had given him as a gift. Emily, in turn, was torn. Part of her had grown attached to that family, to those children, even to Henry. But another part still remembered how she had arrived there, the lack of choice, the debt her father had with Henry. It was one afternoon, when she was alone in the garden she had planted, that her father appeared. Emily hadn't seen him since the day he left her there. The anger she felt upon seeing him get out of the pickup truck was immediate and overwhelming. Emily, he said, his voice hesitant, what do you want here? I came to see you, to see how you are. Now you care. Months after selling me off like I was an object? Robert flinched at the words. I had no choice, daughter. The debt was too large. There's always a choice, father. You chose to sacrifice me to save your own skin. Emily, please, I'm sorry. Every day I wake up with this burden, but I didn't know what else to do. Emily looked at the man who had raised her, the man who had once been her hero. Now he just seemed small and cowardly. Is the debt settled? Robert nodded. It is. Henry released me from the debt 2 months ago. Emily felt something stir inside her. He released it? Why? He said you had already paid more than enough with your work and dedication. He said you owed nothing more, and neither do I. Emily didn't know what to feel. Henry had released the debt and hadn't told her. Why? I came to get you, Emily. You can come home now. The words should have brought relief, joy. But Emily felt only confusion. Home? What home, father? You sold the only home we had when you brought me here. Robert lowered his eyes. I managed to rent a small place. It's not much, but it's yours if you want to come back. Emily looked around. She saw the ranch, the house where she had spent the last few months, the garden she had planted. She saw the children playing in the distance, heard their laughter. That had become more of a home than any place she had lived before. Father, I don't know if I want to come back. Robert looked at her, surprised. But you can be free now. You don't have to stay here anymore. I know. But maybe I want to stay. Not out of obligation, but by choice. You're confused. It's natural after all you've been through. No, Father. For the first time in a long time, I'm seeing things clearly. You took me out of my life without giving me a choice. Now I have a choice, and I'm going to make the one that's best for me. Robert fell silent. not knowing what to say. "Think carefully, Emily. Don't make hasty decisions." "I will think, but for now, please leave. I need time." Robert nodded sadly, got back into the pickup truck and drove away. Emily stood there in the garden, her legs trembling, her heart racing. She needed to talk to Henry. Emily found him in the barn, fixing a saddle. When he saw her, he smiled, but the smile faded when he saw the expression on her face. "What happened?" "My father was here. He told me you released the debt 2 months ago. Why didn't you tell me?" Henry set the saddle aside and approached. "Because I didn't want you to feel obligated to stay just out of gratitude. But I had the right to know." "You're right. I should have told you. But I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That you would leave the second you knew you were free." His words hit her hard. Emily realized there was more depth to this than she had imagined. "Henry, I need to understand one thing. Why do you want me to stay here? Because I'm useful? Because the children like me? Or for another reason?" Henry took a deep breath as if preparing to jump off a cliff. "Because I've fallen in love with you." The world stopped. Emily stood there motionless, processing the words. "How?" "I've fallen in love with you, Emily. I don't know when it happened. Maybe it was when you climbed that roof in the storm. Maybe it was when you calmed Johnny down with your songs. Maybe it was when you spent hours reading documents to help me. Or maybe it was all of that together. But at some point you stopped being just someone who was here out of obligation and became the most important person in my life." Emily felt tears streaming down her face. "This is crazy. You've only known me for a few months." "I know. Believe me, I know how crazy it sounds, but it's the truth. And I'm not asking you to love me back. I'm just telling you what I feel because you deserve to know." Emily didn't know what to say. There were so many emotions clashing inside her that it was impossible to organize her thoughts. "I need time," she finally said. "I know, and you have all the time you need." Emily left the barn and went to the only place where she could think clearly, the garden. She sat among the flowers she had planted and let her thoughts flow. She thought about her father, about how he had put her in that situation. She thought about Henry, about how he was when she arrived versus how he was now. She thought about the children, about how attached she had become to them. She thought about herself, about who she was before coming to that ranch and who she had become. The truth was that she had changed. She was no longer the scared girl her father had brought months ago. She was stronger, more confident, more aware of her own worth. And for the first time in her life, she had the power to choose her own destiny. But with that power came the responsibility of choice, and choosing meant giving something up. If she stayed, she would be choosing to build a life there, with all the complications that would bring. If she left, she would be leaving behind people she loved and who loved her. Emily spent entire days pondering. She watched Henry playing with the children, saw the kind man he had become. She saw Beth studying diligently to get into veterinary school. She saw Greg helping his younger siblings with their homework. She saw Ryan cooking with passion. She saw Johnny running free and happy. And she realized something fundamental. She didn't want to leave that behind. But there was a difference between not wanting to leave and actively choosing to stay. The first was passive, based on fear or inertia. The second was active, based on desire and her own will. Emily needed to be sure she was making the right choice for the right reasons. It was one night, after everyone had fallen asleep, that she finally found her answer. She was in the backyard looking at the stars when Beth appeared. "Can't sleep?" the girl asked. "Too many things on my mind." Beth sat beside her on the grass. "Is it about staying or leaving?" Emily looked at her in surprise. "How do you know?" "I'm not dumb. I saw your father here. I saw you and my dad talking. I've seen you thinking all these days." Emily sighed. "And what do you think I should do?" "It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you want. And if I don't know what I want?" Beth was silent for a moment, then said, "When my mother left, I was so full of hate. Hate for her for leaving, hate for my dad for not being better, hate for myself for not being enough to make her stay. But you know what I learned? that people come and go from our lives, but what matters is how we choose to deal with it. You're very wise for your age. I had to grow up fast, but Emily, if you leave, I won't hate you. I'll be sad, very sad, but I'll understand. Because unlike my mother, you gave us a choice. You let us get to know you, you let us love you, and that's already more than she did. Emily hugged Beth, and the two stayed there, under the stars, in a comfortable silence. But if you stay, Beth continued quietly, know that it will be because we want you here. Truly. Not out of obligation, not out of pity. Because you're part of this family now. Those words were what Emily needed to hear. The next day she sought out Henry. I've made my decision. Henry froze, fear visible in his eyes. And what is it? I'm going to stay, but on one condition. What? That this be a new beginning for all of us. No obligations from the past, no debts, nothing that ties us to how things started. If I'm going to stay, it's because I choose to stay. And I want you and the children to choose me too, not because you need to, but because you want to. Henry smiled, and it was the most genuine and happiest smile Emily had ever seen on him. I choose you. Every day I choose you. And what about the children? Why don't you ask them? Henry gathered the children in the living room. Everyone was confused, not knowing what was happening. Emily has something to say, Henry announced. Emily looked at those 4 pairs of eyes and felt her heart tighten with love. I know I came here in a difficult way, and I know it wasn't easy for any of you to accept me. But in the last few months, something changed. You've become my family, and I wanted to know, do you want me to stay, for real? Johnny was the first to move. He ran and hugged Emily's legs tightly. Please don't go. Ryan came next, hugging her from the side. Greg smiled and nodded positively. And then Beth approached slowly. If you stay, I'd like you to be more than just someone who lives here. What do you mean? I'd like you to be our mom. Not the mom who abandoned us, but the mom who chose to stay. Emily began to cry. Tears of happiness, relief, and love overflowed from her eyes. She hugged all the children, holding them as if they were the most precious things in the world. I'd be honored. Henry watched the scene with tears in his own eyes. For the first time in years, his family was complete. Not in the way it started, but in a better, more genuine way. The following months were about rebuilding in every sense. Henry and Emily started dating, slowly and with respect, getting to know each other not out of obligation, but as 2 people who genuinely cared for one another. They discovered they had more in common than they imagined. Both had lost important people. Both had been forced to be strong when they just wanted to fall apart. But more importantly, both believed in the importance of family and community. Emily enrolled in a night course to finish the studies she had abandoned. Henry fully supported her, taking on more household chores so she could study. Beth helped with the studies, and the boys made sure to be quiet during Emily's study time. The ranch prospered. With Theodore defeated and no one sabotaging, production increased. Henry hired more workers, all from the local community, and the ranch became an example of how a business can benefit an entire region. Beth passed the entrance exam for veterinary school, fulfilling her dream. The high school graduation ceremony was emotional, with the whole family present, shouting and applauding when she received her diploma. Greg continued to excel in school and started giving private lessons to children in the area, discovering his passion for teaching. Ryan opened a small bakery with Henry's help, selling bread and cakes he made with so much love. Johnny grew up strong and healthy, with no more nightmares, a normal and happy child. And Emily flourished. She finished her studies, started helping other women in the area who were in difficult situations, creating a network of support and solidarity. She became respected in the community not just as Henry's wife, but as Emily Johnson, a strong and capable woman in her own right. It was on a Sunday morning, a year and a half after her decision to stay, that Henry called her for a talk. "Shall we take a walk?" They walked through the property, passing by the pastures where the cattle grazed peacefully, the garden that Emily had planted and that was now lush, the white fences that shone under the sun. Henry stopped at a high point from where you could see the whole ranch. It was a beautiful, serene view, full of life. When you arrived here, I saw this ranch as a burden, something I had to keep running out of obligation. But you changed that. You turned this place into a real home." Emily smiled, taking his hand. "We turned it together." Henry turned to her, and Emily saw that he was nervous. "Emily Johnson, I know our story didn't start in the most romantic way, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. You made me want to be a better man. You made me believe in love again. You gave me a real family." He knelt, and Emily felt her heart race. "And because of that, I want to ask you, will you marry me? Not because you have to, not out of obligation, but because you choose to be by my side every day of your life." Tears streamed down Emily's face. She looked at the man who had started as a cold stranger and had become her best friend, her companion, her love. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The wedding was simple but beautiful, held at the ranch itself, with the whole community present. Emily wore a simple white dress that Beth had helped choose. Garden flowers decorated everything, and the children were the attendants. When the priest asked if they accepted each other, Emily and Henry answered together, with conviction and true love, "I do." The kiss was accompanied by applause and shouts of joy. It was a new beginning, not just for the two of them, but for the whole family. The party lasted late into the night. There was food, music, dancing, and lots of joy. Emily danced with Henry, with each of the children, with her father, who appeared humbly apologizing once again. "I made many mistakes, Emily, but I'm happy you found your place." Emily hugged her father, finally making peace with the past. "Me too, Dad. Me too." When they were finally alone, Emily and Henry sat on the porch holding hands, looking at the stars. "Are you happy?" Henry asked. Emily looked around, seeing the ranch that was now her home, thinking of the children who were now her children, feeling the hand of the man who was now her husband. Happier than I ever imagined possible. And it was true. What had started as a nightmare, as a forced obligation, had turned into the greatest blessing of her life. Emily had learned that sometimes the worst beginnings lead to the best endings. That love isn't something you can force, but something that grows naturally when nurtured with patience, understanding, and choice. She had chosen to stay. She had chosen to love. She had chosen to build a life in that place. And by making those choices, she had found not just a home, but a true family. The years passed, bringing joys and challenges, as all life does. But Emily and Henry faced everything together, with the strength that comes from a chosen love, not an imposed one. Beth graduated as a veterinarian and opened a clinic in town, where she mainly treated animals from needy families. Greg became a teacher and transformed the lives of many students with his dedication. Ryan expanded his bakery, which became a community gathering spot. Johnny grew up and decided to follow in his father's footsteps, taking over the management of the ranch. And Emily became the heart that kept everyone together. She was the mother she had chosen to be, the devoted wife, the trusted friend. Her home was always open, her table always had room for one more, her heart always had space for more love. One afternoon, already with some grey hairs, Emily was sitting on the porch when Beth came for a visit. "How did you do it, Emily? How did you turn something so awful at the beginning into something so beautiful?" Emily thought for a moment before answering. "I think it's because I learned to tell the difference between what was imposed on me and what I chose. I couldn't choose to come here, but I could choose how to react to it. I couldn't choose my initial situation, but I could choose my attitude. And every day I chose love instead of anger, hope instead of despair, building instead of destroying. And you never regretted it?" Emily looked at the ranch, at the life she had built, at the family she loved. "Not for a second." End of story. Dear listeners, now it's up to you. What did you think of this story of transformation and choice? Have you also had to turn a difficult situation into something positive? Share your experience with us in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave that precious like and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.